You need to understand that there was really more than one miniature effort going on at the same time for Dune. There was not only the model shop run by Brian Smithies, there was also Emilio Ruiz's foreground miniature shop. They were still working on some of their stuff at the same time, so we kind of overlapped. It was a pretty successful collaboration, I would say.
Emilio used to make me laugh because it was so real. And I just don't know how one person can dream up things like that.
Me interesaba porque yo en cada película hago un experimento, veo dónde puedo meter esto, dónde puedo meter lo otro, ideas que yo he tenido, cosas que he soñado y las meto.
We'd start off with concept drawing and storyboards. So you'd see what was actually required for the film. From that, you would then have to move on to working out the scale that was required to achieve those shots, which means you've got to obviously think about your depth of focus on the lens you're using, and you have to visualize the whole shot.
Brian Smithies was a hands-on builder and a designer, particularly the early phases, but then he would go out on the stage, he would set up the shots, he would make sure that the shots actually looked correct so that the miniatures were presented in their best light. Often he and one or two of his helpers would get involved and set up the live action shoot versus a motion control shoot, so that he'd be out at the sand stages setting up, let's say, the crash of a Harkonnen Thopter in the desert, which was done live action, just on a wire, where at the same time then maybe half an hour later he'd have to wander over to another stage and check on a motion control shot.
The motion control system we had was an extremely primitive one. It was simple. And poor old Eric, I mean, he was sitting there sort of pressing buttons and knobs and numbers and just periodically watching puffs of smoke come out of equipment.
With our rig, basically what we could do is we could start the camera and it would go a certain distance and it would stop, and that's all we could do. It was pretty crude. All the calculations I did on my hand calculator about how fast and how far we went. We could do that several times and it would be exactly the same move every time. We might put a different model in front of it. Some passes we would put like a Giddy Prime in front, or the Giddy Prime background, or the smoke coming out of the mouth of the big giant face. We would shoot those separately and then put them together optically later on in post.
We did this shot of the Harkonnen ship and the Atreides ship. Emilio Ruiz did the model, and both these were shot down at the Aztec Stadium car park in Mexico City. And the foreground model, which is what Emilio had built, was stuck up on a tower of scaffold, and tucked down in the middle of the car park area was a full-size set.
Y yo metía muñequitos entre la gente real, o sea, muñequitos que colocados cerca de la cámara, a una distancia prudencial, me daban el tamaño de los que estaban al fondo. Y luego por detrás metimos otras naves para dar una sensación de que era un sitio donde, un aeropuerto. Entonces hice un practicable, se hizo una torre, ahí se montó la maqueta que encajaba con la cámara. Y desde ahí, por un hueco que se veía al fondo la puerta que encajaba con la nave que yo tenía puesta en primer término.
Well, Emilio, you know, comes from that old school. You would have a wall, that's a real wall, built full size, and then he would come up and do his little teeny wall with all the details. Now, one is right here, next to the camera, one is down there, but your eye is gonna put them together. But it takes an eye to do that.
Models can come in a lot of different sizes. When you do that, it's for usually one reason, it's detail. Because you can't get all the little tiny bolt heads that screw the door on in when you're down to, you know, a spaceship that's this big.
For the live action on the Harvester, we actually built probably 3 scales, I think. The smallest one being about, I suppose about 3 inches. Then we had the large one. Well, the large one, again, was only, I think, probably about 7 or 8 foot long. And that was the one which we did establishing shots and so on. The one that was swallowed by the worm was probably about a foot long, maybe 14 inches.
That blasted worm. We're not going to discuss worms, are we?
Shooting the worms was one of the great challenges of the production.
We had to physically do it, you know. Today you can create a worm in the computer make its skin ripple, make his muscles do whatever you want, make him wink. You know, you can just do it inside the computer. But back then, it was difficult. And then they always had this tendency of looking like phallic symbols or huge turds. You know, it was a nightmare to figure out, you know, what am I going to do with this? This looks horrible.
I loathed and detested it in all its sections and even as the full thing. I used to look at the damn thing out on the back lot because there were obviously various worms. There was the head part, there were about 2 or 3 middle parts, I've forgotten, and the tail part as well.
Carlo did a lot of tests and a lot of work, and you know, and it was very, very hard to come up with the design. And Carlo Rambaldi, it's like Emilio Ruiz. It's almost a lost, not almost, it is a lost art.
David Lynch dijo una cosa sobre mí que es interesante, porque dijo que no había que dejar en desuso mi sistema, que mi sistema será muy antiguo y pero que no había que dejarlo en desuso porque el trabajo que yo hacía era todavía muy interesante, de tantísimas satisfacciones que he tenido. Esta de David fue otra más importante para mí.